Okay, now I want to talk some about moral leadership. We've had numerous sources: the DAF textbook, the Leadership Challenge, the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and Skills for New Managers. All of them highlight how being ethical, being credible, really important to leadership. And I think being important to just about anything that you do. And unfortunately, the ethical climate in the U.S. right now is not very good, and it hasn't been for a good while, and it's probably going in the wrong direction. That's Jeff Skilling. He was the CEO of Enron. He lied to stockholders, said buy the shares of the company, was falsifying accounting reports, was selling his own stock. He's in jail right now. That's Bernie Madoff. He started a Ponzi scheme, and I don't think he did it intentionally. A lot of people say what happened was he started a fund where he was investing other people's money for them. And it was going really well until one quarter when it didn't. So instead of admitting, hey guys, I had a bad quarter, he stole some money, basically went out and got more investors and used the money that they bought in to pay off the investors that quarter, thinking, oh, in the future I'll make it up. It's just a little lie. I can fix this. The problem is the lie kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is where the little lie leads to the big lie. This is Dennis Kozlowski. He was the CEO of Tyco. Tyco is not the toy company. They were actually really big in like fire protection systems. He used the company as his personal piggy bank. He had him pay for a cool apartment, for trips for him. He had a birthday party for his wife featuring Jimmy Buffett and put it all on the shareholders. He's in jail. This guy died in jail. This guy's in jail. All right? It's not always, though, just illegal things that are unethical. Here we have the three CEOs back around 2009, all right, when the economy was in free fall. General Motors, there's their CEO, oh, that's their CEO, General Motors and Ford's CEO and Chrysler's CEO all went to Congress to argue that the government needed to back loans to the automobile industry because credit markets were freezed up. Ford actually didn't need the loans because they were actually in worse shape a few years earlier and were able to secure a lot of loans before the big stock market crash and the economy went to the toilet with real estate problems. But they didn't want to see the whole industry fall under. Now, going and talking to the government about securing loans, it made a lot of sense that actually we're all paid back. All right, and there was a lot of I mean, those two companies still had to declare bankruptcy. General Motors, their stockholders lost everything. All the General Motors stock that's out there now is new stock. The thing that people found particularly unethical, though, is they all traveled from Detroit to DC for the same meeting at the same time, and they took 3 different private jets. And it was kind of like, you're not getting it. You're not getting it. The economy is in bad straits. We have high unemployment. We have a lot of problems with the crash that took place in 2008, 2009 in that area, and you guys aren't getting it. The next time they came, I think one of them drove in a Ford car or something like that, but they learned their lesson there. But again, this is just, it shouldn't have been done. It kind of irked people. Not illegal, but it irked people. This is John Thune, all right? He was the one of the top people at one of the big Wall Street firms that needed to be bailed out. And during the bailout, he completely redid his office for something like $50,000 to refurnish his office. I guess some of the very uncomfortable chairs he bought were like Louis XIV chairs that were, incredibly expensive. So, just thought that's not right. Of course, we got Volkswagen. That actually was illegal, where they committed fraud and said that their clean diesel was clean, and it really wasn't clean. Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, she was this high-flying, new, scientist CEO. But my wife's a scientist. I think most scientists are definitely on the up and up. I don't think anybody says I'm going to get into science because I want to make all the money. But Elizabeth Holmes, the former CEO and founder of a failed blood testing startup. She was found guilty on 4 charges defrauding investors, capping off the stunning downfall of a former tech icon, moving into prison. Now, This I have in your notes. A CBS poll taken in 2002 found that 79% of respondents believed questionable business practices were widespread. Fewer than a third think CEOs are honest. You don't have to write this down. This just gets the idea that we had some struggles. Only 37, this is from a 2017 one that I just found, only 37% of people consider CEOs credible today, according to an Edelman Trust Barometer, an all-time low for the 17-year-old survey, and down 12% from just last year. It's not apples to oranges, they're different surveys, but it's also, we're kind of seeing that same kind of trend, if not worse. According to a long-running Gallup poll, 34% of citizens surveyed in 1975 said they had a great deal or a lot of confidence. Over a third had a lot of confidence in business. Today, or it's 2016, only 18%. And it's important. I've heard some very credible people say the difference between the United States and Somalia, it's not really that our people are just so much smarter. It's not that we have better natural resources. It's that there's a level of basic trust. In the US, you're out for a trip, you're in another state or something like that, you go into a gas station to get a pop, you take the pop off the shelf, you walk up and you pay the person for it. In some places that could never happen because somebody would just walk out with a pop. So you say, whoa, pay first and then you get the pop. And the customers say, I'm not going to pay you first, then you won't give me the soda. You know, they'll have a locked chest there. There's no trust either way. So you don't have much in the way of economic activity. And that's a problem. We need key levels of trust. Now, law is what we must do. All right? And breaking most laws is unethical. Sometimes it's going to be ethical to break a law, but that's a different thing. Someone's starving or the speed to get somebody to the hospital who really needs to get there quickly. Ethics is what we should do. And it's usually thought of as a higher level than just the law. All right? If you follow the law, then doing anything less would be illegal. Ethics is doing what people expect. And so it takes a little bit more of kind of getting a pulse of your stakeholders. The DAF textbook says today, here's some key things to think about. Unethical leaders. Now, a lot of these things aren't illegal. Being ethical and self-serving. Excessively promoting self-interest. You can do those things legally, but they're saying it's unethical today. Most people would say they shouldn't do that. Practicing deception, lying, breaching agreements, that can be illegal if they're formal, but otherwise, you know, it could be that they're just doing things poorly. Dealing unfairly, shifting the blame to others, diminishing others' dignity, neglecting followers' development, withholding help and support, lacking the courage to confront unjust acts. Now, these things can change. We kind of have to be students of ethics. Because probably at one time, you know, the idea of shifting blame to others, it might have been, well, that's what the leader does. You know, they blame the low guy on the totem pole, throw him under the bus. Neglecting follower development, that's up to the followers. Some people may have said that. But today, the DAP book at least argues more and more, this is what's expected. Or expected to not do. Here, what is expected? An ethical leader possesses humility. It's not all about them. They have a concern for the greater good. They're honest and straightforward, fulfilling commitments, striving for fairness, taking responsibility, showing respect for each individual. Not always agreeing with them, not always praising them, but showing respect. All right? Encouraging and developing others, serving others, showing the courage to stand up for what is right. We're going to talk a lot about courage in a minute. Now, acting like a moral leader can be tough. Leaders can act for moral values, though. If they can do that and encourage moral values in the workplace, that can be a really good thing. Leaders articulate and uphold moral standards and serve as a model for the organization. And leaders need to build ethical organizations by demonstrating, actually showing the importance of serving people in society. Now, leaders must do this despite something we all have, peer pressure. Come on, everybody's doing it. Everybody packs their compensation committee to make sure our salaries are really high, all right? That's just the game, all right? It helps us all when the CEOs get together, all right? It's kind of the wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Personal ego. Especially for people who are CEOs, a lot of them have a pretty big ego. So like Bernie Madoff, admitting things didn't go well one quarter destroys them. They gotta say, it's all right, I'm still a human being. All right, ego and self-confidence are very different. Self-confidence says, I make mistakes now and then, but I'm still good, stay with me. Pressure to succeed. All right, you're hired for the company to hit these numbers. There's a pressure to succeed. So it's not, I do seriously believe, and there's a lot of evidence, that doing the right thing helps in the long run. But in the short run, you lose some battles. And so it is tough. And it is something we have to have the faith that doing the right thing in the long run will be the right thing to do. Now, moral leadership is about two things. Understanding what is right and what is wrong, kind of being that student of ethics and student of your actions, and then making sure that you actually do the right thing. And that's where a lot of courage comes in. A famous model of personal moral development shows that people tend to go through 3 stages. Very early on, many of us, and this is when we're toddlers, little kids, we're at the pre-conventional level stage. Individuals are concerned with receiving rewards and avoiding punishment. The cookie's there, mom and dad aren't gonna know I'm gonna get the cookie, I'm grabbing the cookie. If I can avoid punishment, I do it. Most of us move beyond that pretty quickly. Some don't, kind of the sociopaths that are out there, and they do whatever they can to get what they want. But that's not, what we would say a really moral and ethical person is. Now, the conventional level is where some people argue most people end up being. In the conventional level, people conform to the expectations of good behavior as defined by colleagues, family, and friends. All right? This is a two-edged sword, though. They follow the rules, the norms, the corporate culture. If being good is what they see people around them, and being honest they see people around them doing, that's what they do. All right, I want to be a part of this family. The family wouldn't take a cookie, if mom said don't take a cookie and left the room, they wouldn't do it. All right, so I'm not going to do it. Unfortunately, the other side of the sword can say, well, if everybody around me is lying, I'm going to lie. It could be that you're going to a book signing to get an author to sign your book at a bookstore. And you can say, well, everybody's waiting in line. All right? You say, well, that's what people are doing. That's what the people around me are doing, and that's fine. You wouldn't go and jump the line or cut in or something like that. All right? That can be a good way that conventional level of moral development works. Most riots, however, are started because somebody does something that's out of control and everybody starts to move towards it. We have this followership cascade of bad things happening. There used to be a lot of riots up on Lafayette Street around the Central Michigan, Western Michigan football game. And I think even today, the fire trucks will come along and spray water into the dumpsters over there because people would light dumpsters on fire. All right, this is a good while ago since we had a major one of these. A friend of mine, Tom Edmonds, was the sheriff. And he said he pulled up and there's masses of students everywhere. And he opened up the door of his cruiser, and he's got the whole sheriff's outfit on. And he begins to get out, and a beer bottle just explodes on the door. All right, some kid had run out of the crowd and heaved a beer bottle at him. Of course, that kid turned around to run back in and ran right into one of his deputies and now has assaulting a police officer on his record. But what I'm trying to get at is that kid, it was probably that, somebody lit a couch on fire, that'll be funny. And so somebody did something else and the whole crowd. And that kid, I don't think ever, walking down the street would say, oh, there's a cop, I'm gonna chuck this bottle at him. But people around him were acting crazy, so that's what they did. This is why when we're at work, just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean we should do it. All right, we have to just say, well, no, everybody kind of lies about this to the customer. You got to make that call about what you're going to do. And being able to do that moves to what they call the post-conventional approach. Leaders are guided by an internalized set of principles recognized as right or wrong. Looking beyond just their friend group or the company or those beyond. Lying to customers, we don't do that. All right, I'm not going to be a part of that. I'm going to work my way out of it, or it's not something I'm going to be with. These internal values become more important than just the few people around you. Don't get me wrong, if people are doing good things, you can learn from them. But if people are not, you can stand up to that. Research has consistently found a direct relationship between higher levels of moral development, where people get their idea of what moral is. Is it just for my friend group, or is it larger? And more ethical behavior on the job. When leaders operate at level 3, just go off the page here, the post-conventional level, they focused on higher principles. They encourage others to think for themselves and expand their understanding of moral levels. So that level 3, post-conventional. Okay? The next page, I just have what I find really kind of handy, some ethical tests. If something's happening at work and you're like, I don't know if we should do that. Sometimes running through a couple of these tests in your mind can be really helpful to give you a feeling for what to do. The golden rule test. Would I want people to do this to me? All right, would I want people to lie to me? Would I want people to mislead me? But what if everybody else did this test? All right, throwing garbage out the window. Just throwing a piece of garbage out the window. What if everybody did that? Is it the kind of world you want to live in, where you're slogging through garbage everywhere? The parents test, or the grandparents tests, or something like that. As long as you have parents and grandparents that are, think of somebody that you think is ethical. How would they feel if they found out I did this, or was part of this decision? The consequences test. Look in the long run. Might this action have bad consequences, such as damage to relationships or loss of respect now or in the future? Might I come to regret doing this? I'm assuming Bernie Madoff was pretty regretful that he started what became the biggest fraud of all time. This is my personal favorite, the front page test. How would I feel if my actions, and I think your true intentions, were reported on the front page of my hometown paper? Or I think a big billboard out on 74. All right? Are these things that I would be proud to say, this is the decision I made, this is truly why I did it? Sometimes using a couple of these tests can be important. Now, an ethical dilemma is a complex situation that often involves a conflict. Things aren't always that easy. It's like, kind of, damned if I do, damned if I don't. Sometimes it's good to talk through those with others in an honest way. If your company has an ombuds, they're not as popular as they used to be, but this used to be somebody that you can go and talk to about ethical decisions. Can be something to do. Sometimes just running through some of these tests, it begins to give you an indication of, this is the better of two problems. Okay? Now this is about kind of knowing what, all this stuff, the last few pages is about knowing kind of right from wrong in an ethical sense, not just a legal sense, but an ethical sense. What it often takes to actually do right is leadership courage. Because lying sometimes will get you out of something immediately. Oh yeah, I did that, because the boss is hounding me. But it's not going to get you out of it in the long run, and it takes courage to say, no, I didn't do that, and they might be angry with you right now. You might have to stay at work late, or something like that. It takes courage to stand up and say, I'm going to do the right thing. It's almost, again, people are like, in a high schooler. Say, come on, steal some, we're all doing it. What are you, chicken? No, I'm going to stand up to you and say, no, I'm not going to do that, or I'm just going to stand up to you and walk away. All right? And that really takes a lot of courage to get through that peer pressure. Again, peer pressure, if it's in the right direction, can be wonderful. But if it's in the wrong direction, you got to be able to say to yourself, no, it's not something I want to do. Now, what do we mean by courage? Courage isn't being fearless. Courage is not being fearless. All right? Let me put that down here. Courage is the ability to step forward through fear. All right? It's not being fearless. Not being fearless. All right? Because you can feel fear and still step through it. Courage means accepting responsibility. Yeah, I made a mistake. Courage means non-conformity. Everybody else is doing it this, but I don't think that's right. That's wrong. It doesn't pass my ethical tests. Courage means often going outside your comfort zone. It's often easier to just go along with the crowd. Courage means asking what you want and saying what you will think. Courage means fighting for what you believe in. It takes a lot of courage to stand up and kind of fight City Hall if you think that's what needs to be done. All right? Again, courage is not another word for fearless. Not another word for fearless. And where this concept really came through to me was when I was reading a book called The Sea Wolf by Jack London. And don't let you be distracted by that for a second. The Sea Wolf is set back around 1900, and you've got this guy out in a pleasure boat, a gentleman, who's on a pleasure boat out in San Francisco Bay. He fell off. He got picked up by a whaling boat that was going out on a 2 or 3 year voyage. They picked him up and saved his life, but they were riding the tide out. They weren't going back to San Francisco. So this guy became part of the crew. And the captain of the crew was Wolf Larsen, who was the Sea Wolf. And he was kind of one of these Mr. Krabs types, tough as barnacles. And he would, yell and all this kind of stuff. And I think they did an excellent job of discussing the difference between courage and fearlessness, bravery and just not feeling fear. And the situation came up was when there was a big storm. And the gentleman, who had to become part of the crew to earn his keep, was manning the wheel while there were other people working the sails, and everybody was scared, and the Sea Wolf was just yelling at the storm. And this is what transpired. The gentleman held his arm out and said, "You'll observe there," I said, "a slight trembling. It is because I am afraid. The flesh is afraid, I am afraid in my mind because I do not wish to die. But my spirit masters the trembling flesh and the qualms of the mind. I am more than brave, I am courageous. Your flesh is not afraid, you are not afraid. On the other hand, it costs you, Mr. Larsen, nothing to encounter danger. On the other hand, it gives you delight. You enjoy it. You may be unafraid, Mr. Larsen, but you must admit that the bravery or the courage is mine." So if you're trembling a little bit, all right, and you still go through and say, "Guys, I'm not going to do that. I'm not really comfortable about that," that takes incredible courage. All right? And if it's like, we're not going to do it anyway, that's great. All right? But just, I'm trying to get across the idea that showing courage isn't always easy. All right? Because you're pushing against fear. How does courage apply to leadership? Well, acting like a moral leader requires personal courage. Leaders have to know themselves, understand what they stand for, their strengths and weaknesses, often be nonconformists. Opposing unethical conduct requires courage. Just going and saying to your boss, "I don't think we should be doing this," or "I'm not going to do this," that takes a lot of courage because you could lose your job, you could get yelled at, you could get demoted. All right? Whistleblowing is actually when employees, the official definition most people use is when employees go outside their company. And sometimes you need to do that because your company isn't doing anything about it to oppose illegal, immoral, or unethical practices. That requires a lot of courage. This is a guy named Joseph Darby. He was a soldier working at the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. Okay? Well, it was a while ago, but U.S. got in a lot of trouble there because they were basically torturing and mucking with the detainees, the prisoners. And a lot of these prisoners, they didn't even know if they'd done anything yet. They were just holding them, and they were going to see if they were terrorists or something like that. But they were sicking dogs on them and making them be naked with electrodes on them and telling them they were going to shock them and taking pictures of it all. Well, he saw this going on, and he saw that there were all of these pictures. Well, he took some of the pictures, and he just kind of slid it under the lieutenant's door. All right? I guess he must have talked to him or something like that, because the lieutenant at least knew who it was. But it went through the chain of command, because this is against Army rules, because if they weren't terrorists coming in, they were terrorists going out after they were treated that way. And that isn't the way that we're supposed to treat these people. Where it really took him a lot of courage, though, is this is going through, and they find out about it, and everybody who was doing it in the company is really scared and upset. And then there was one day they were all in the lunchroom, and Donald Rumsfeld, who was the Secretary of Defense at that time, is on the TV talking about the atrocities at Abu Ghraib. And he says, While Darby was having lunch in the mess hall watching Donald Rumsfeld testify before Congress about Abu Ghraib, the defense secretary said, "There are many who did their duty professionally, and we should mention that as well. First, Specialist Joseph Darby, who alerted appropriate authorities that abuses were occurring. He says, I just stopped mid-bite. I was eating and I just stopped. What the hell just happened? Now the anxiety came back. Now I'm worried," Darby remembers. Everyone in the unit knew within 4 hours. So he's here in the middle of Iraq with a bunch of people with guns, and they're saying, well, you're the Fink, even though he said this is a bad thing to do, and he kept it in-house. He didn't go outside. Okay. This is Sharon Watkins. She was an accountant at Enron. She saw what they were doing, basically lying to people, and people were telling people to invest when things were really going south. She went and told her boss, and her boss said, mind your own business. So she did take it outside. She was a single mom. She lost her job. All right, I think she's doing okay now. She was speaking fees and things like that. But again, in that position, took a lot of courage. You did the right thing, whistleblower, so naturally we have to fire you. Goodbye. All right, hopefully we'll never be in that position. But again, what I'm trying to get across is doing the ethical thing, we should feel courageous when we do that. Finding personal courage. When they interview people about how they found personal courage, what do they say? Well, one, believing in a higher purpose. Could be God or just a belief that there is a universal right and wrong. Drawing strength from certain others, having family, having friends, having a well-rounded life. You can say, yeah, I might get in trouble here, but that's okay. There'll still be people that support me. Welcoming failure. And I don't think failure is ever something we welcome. This is the words out of the DAF textbook. But realizing that, if I lose my job, or I get demoted, or I don't get my bonus this quarter, it's not the end of the world. All right, I move forward. Harnessing frustration and anger. And I wouldn't push this too far, but getting across the idea of properly controlled, saying that they shouldn't do that. This is wrong. It makes me angry that they're lying to people or something like that. Now, just to kind of cap off talking about ethics, I'll just reinforce Maxwell's irrefutable laws of leadership. One of their laws, Law 6, is the law of solid ground. And they say trust is the foundation of leadership. As a leader, if you're not being ethical, if you're violating people's trust, even if you're obeying the laws all the time, if you're still thought of not being trustworthy on things that you should do, that's going to completely undermine your leadership. Okay, thank you.